Hello learners, today we will try to learn more about writing autobiographies through an autobiography of an unknown Indian by Nirad C. Chaudhuri. However, let us first familiarize ourselves with different milestones of his life and literary career. Nirad C. Chaudhuri was born in a remote town in Kishorganj at East Bengal. Chaudhuri was the son of a country lawyer and an unlettered mother. His young mind was impressed by William Shakespeare and also mastered Sanskrit classics with a keen mind. And he admired Western culture as much as he did his own. His early association with Indian literary scene was laden with controversies. Chaudhuri shifted his base to England in the 1970s. He chose to live in the university town of Oxford. He had visualized this move as homecoming of sorts, but he realized that it was different England that he dreamt of. He proved to be a man of complex thought processes in England as he had been in India. The English, who unlike his fellow citizens, respected him but could not imagine his unique combination of pride being an Indian coupled with a deep sense of nostalgia for the glorious history of British Empire. Similarly, Chaudhuri could not accept the transformation that English had undergone in years since the decline of the empire, and he was aghast and annoyed by the total lack of commitment to the values. He believed that England on the highest pedestal of the world because of its values and sense of commitment. He set his foot in the literary world through his book, The Autobiography of an Unknown Indian. It was published in 1951 and was followed by many others, including The Continent of Circe, for which he won the Duff Cooper Memorial Prize. His negative emotions like cynicism and disillusionment were reflected in his writings. The last volume of his autobiography, Thy Hand, Great Anarch, which was produced at age of 19, summarizes his thorough understanding of English through a thought-provoking statement, and I quote, "The greatness of English people has passed away forever." He dedicated his first book, The Autobiography of an Unknown Indian, which was published in the year 1951, to the memory of the British Empire. His profound belief in all that was good and living within us was made, shaped and quickened the same British rule, gives us the clarity of his understanding of the British rule. But this sentiment did not augur well with a newly independent nation that was trying to gather its lost strength and glory with its insecurities. The newly found freedom displayed the rich streak of anti-colonial sentiments. Chaudhuri's book was rebuked and he condemned, and he was hounded from his job as a broadcaster and a political commentator for All India Radio. Called the last British imperialist and the last of the Brown Sahibs, he was ostracized by his Indian literati. He received an honorary doctorate from the University of Oxford in the year 1990 and became an honorary CBE, that is, Commander of the Order of British Empire, from Queen Elizabeth II in the year 1922. The essays in his last book, Three Horsemen of the New Apocalypse, which was published shortly before his 100th birthday, return to the subject of the decline of England as well as comment on what he saw as the degeneration of leadership in India. Only in his later years did Chaudhuri win widespread acceptance and appreciation in his homeland. A more cosmopolitan and self-confident South Asian elite specially lauded the final volume of his autobiography. In addition to his autobiographies and his English essays, he wrote a number of literary works in Bengali. Chaudhuri completed his education from Kishoreganj and Kolkata, then known as Calcutta. For his FA school living course, he attended the Ripon College in Calcutta along with the famous Bengali writer Bibhuti Bhushan Bandyopadhyay. He studied history as his undergraduate major from prestigious Scottish Church College, Calcutta. He graduated with honours in history and topped the University of Calcutta. At the Scottish Church College, he attended the seminars of renowned historian Professor Kalidas Nag. After graduation, he enrolled for the MA level of the University of Calcutta. However, he could not complete his MA program. His career began with the position of a clerk in the accounting department of the Indian Army, but he also actively was contributing to popular magazines. His first article on Bharat Chandra, a famous Bengali poet of the 18th century, appeared in the most prestigious English magazine of the time, Modern Review. Chaudhuri quit his mundane job in the accounting department shortly after and started a new career as a journalist and editor. During this period, he was a boarder in Mirzapur Street near College Square, Kolkata, living together with writers like Bibhuti Bhushan Banerjee and Dakshin Naranjan Mitra Majumdar. He then enjoyed editing the then well-known English and Bengali magazines Modern Review, Probashi, Shonibare Chithi. In addition, he also founded two short-lived but highly esteemed Bengali magazines, Samosaik and Notun Potrika. He married Amiya Dhar, a well-known writer herself, in 1932, and the couple had 3 sons. In 1938, Chaudhuri became a secretary to Sarat Chandra Bose, a political leader from the freedom movement. He got connected with the political world and got closely associated with the political leaders of India, Mahatma Gandhi, Jawaharlal Nehru, and more famous brother of Sarat Chandra Bose, Subhash Chandra Bose, the future Netaji. He became conversant with the workings of the inner circle of Indian politics, which led him to be cynical about this eventual progress, and he became progressively disillusioned about the ability of Indian political leadership. Apart from his career as a secretary, Chaudhuri continued to display his literary prowess by contributing articles in Bengali and English to newspapers and magazines. He was also appointed as a political commentator on the Kolkata branch of All India Radio. In 1941, he started working for the Delhi branch of All India Radio. Chaudhuri was a prolific writer even in the very last years of his life, publishing his last work at the age of 99. His wife Amiya Chaudhuri died in 1994 in Oxford, England. He too died in Oxford 2 months short of his 102nd birthday in 1999. He lived at 20 Lathbury Road from 1982 until his death, and a blue plaque was installed by the Oxfordshire Blue Plaques Board in 2008. The rational and intellectual dimension of Chaudhuri's criticism is often misinterpreted and misread. His nostalgic expression of regret at the disappearance of the British Empire from India even more so. It is not that he does not value the status of a free citizen in a free state, but rather than history pursues logic of its own. His logic becomes clear when he says, emerge as creators and preserves of civilization. He draws a distinct line that divides European colonialism and European imperialism, regarding the latter as a constant of history. The new emergence of every new civilization and of every new value in human life is accompanied by and inseparable from domination of a particular group, he asserts. The autobiographies with a rare artistic touch and depth of imaginative literature are few. This was one domain where Chaudhuri's work was recognized. The two volumes have organic unity and are controlled by an idea that is common for both. No inner contradictions and false projections of endless details blight the integrity of design and form. Chaudhuri is adept at striking the balance between the subject self and the object world. He instills life into other characters and reveals insights into their motives and passion. As one of the finest masters of English prose in India, Chaudhuri belongs to those rare group of scholarly writers who excelled in creating reflective prose, such as Emerson, Vivekananda and Mohan Roy. To their long and supple sentence, he added sinewy strength and vitality. A relatively abstract diction is accorded a richer, more reminiscent figurative life. His prose has a majestic grandeur. Despite its severe thought and strenuous scholarship, the two volumes of Nirad Chaudhuri's autobiographies are a joy to read. The passionate energy of its prose sustains the interest of the reader eternally with its sparkling wit, lively anecdotes, various allusions and irony possessed of extraordinary range and depth. The Autobiography of an Unknown Indian was Chaudhuri's first book and also his best. Chaudhuri's autobiography is more a national than personal history, and it gives a detailed description of conditions in which an unknown Indian grew to manhood in the early decades of the 20th century. The picture paints the three different phases of India. They are spiritual, secular and iconoclastic. Gandhi's autobiography, The Story of My Experiments with Truth, is a spiritual manual, an absorbing human document, agonizingly frank and unflinchingly honest in its self-portraiture. Nehru's An Autobiography is a sketchy, personal and incomplete account of the past, which presents a vivid picture of both the man and his milieu. And in this sense, their autobiographies can be considered as condensed versions of their vision of India. The self-revelation, which is the main element in the art of autobiography writing, remains in the background, but it is their national character which is of importance here. Gandhi deals not only with his constant search for truth, but also with contemporary social and political conditions and events. In Nehru's autobiography also, we are in contact with a deeply sensitive personality, keenly alive to political and social problems of the country, whereas Chaudhuri's is ponderously erudite, cynical and lacks in personal revelation. His autobiography is a slavish commemoration of the memories and baneful influences of the pernicious British rule in India. When Gandhi and Nehru look at India from within, Chaudhuri distances himself from it and looks at it from the vantage point of a foreigner. And yet, we can derive an image of an India, an iconoclastic India, from this unknown Indian's autobiography. Chaudhuri's power as a describer speaks for itself in the pages and needs no elaboration. He is a fascinating ground level witness and an expositor of a vanished Indian way of life and of what British imperialism, then at its height, meant to its humble and not so humble subjects. The autobiographical form has almost no tradition in India and tended to be the preserve of the famous. Only two other Indians of his era, Gandhi and Nehru, had tried it with any success. Chaudhuri had a frail frame, but always brimming with enthusiasm and energy of a small bird, and never stood much more than 5 feet tall. Chaudhuri's authority as a describer speaks for itself and needs no explanation. He is an intriguing ground level witness and an expositor of an Indian way of life, which becomes extinct with imprints of British imperialism. The word courage, however, deserves some context. In this book, Chaudhuri displays the courageous streak in two ways: in his literary ambition and in the open declaration of his political and historical beliefs. The Autobiography of an Unknown Indian in 1947 was the first book to introduce the genre of writing autobiographies in India. The autobiographical form has almost no tradition in India and tended to be the preserve of the famous. Only two other Indians of his era, Nehru and Gandhi, had tried it with any success. Chaudhuri was not popular then and genuinely an unknown Indian, living humbly in Delhi and churning out scripts for All India Radio during its changeover from British to Indian control. He had a vaulting ambition of becoming an historian. He reflected on his failure with lot of agony and anguish. The fear of leading an unproductive life and futile death always haunted him. He was also passing through the crisis of male middle age. He was already 50 when this fear was troubling him. 40 years later, in Thy Hand, Great Anarch, Chaudhuri describes how the idea of the book came to him, and I quote, "As I lay in the night on May 4th and 5th, 1947, an idea suddenly flashed into my mind. Why, instead of merely regretting the work of history you cannot write? I asked myself, do you not write history you have passed through and seen enacted before your eyes, and which could not call for research? The answer was too instantaneous. I will. I also decided to give it the form of an autobiography." He later wrote that this exercise of will was helped by the nostalgia of recalling from half a century before his early life in East Bengal. But the book reflected its mood that was somberly informed by the large events that were making India weak. Amidst all of this, Chaudhuri sat before his typewriter and recreated his life from 1897 to 1921. India wriggled and freed herself from British Raj that ended at midnight on August 15, 1947. The subcontinent was partitioned into an independent but shrunken India and a new state, Pakistan. The boundaries were decided by major religious groups like Hindus and Muslims within the adjacent territories. East Bengal became the eastern wing of Pakistan, now Bangladesh, so that the Hindu Chaudhuri's ancestral home suddenly lay in a foreign and predominantly Muslim country. He never visited the place again. The partition raised its ugly heads, and there came the waves of homeless refugees and savagery. The violence included mass murders, communal riots, and the writer was also a witness to street fights of Delhi outside the writer's window. When Mahatma Gandhi was assassinated in the city on January 30, 1948, Chaudhuri took a cynical view of this assassination and of his staunch supporters. When the country was ripe with controversies and sensational happenings, Chaudhuri was busy writing his book. He exclaims that when his country was convulsed and transformed, he was writing with the consciousness of decay and destruction all around him. Bengal was breeding ground for writers, scientists, thinkers, philosophers. The first Indian novel was a Bengali novel. The first Indian scientists were Bengali scientists. The first Asian to win a Nobel Prize, Rabindranath Tagore, wrote in Bengali. Calcutta, which has been little more than a stockade at the beginning of the 18th century, grew to become the largest city in Asia by the end of 19th. Bengalis took pride in considering themselves the most educated, sophisticated people in India, the French of India, as some of them still do. But with education and aspiration came nationalist agitation and the British reaction to it. Bengal was divided by the British into Eastern, mainly Muslim, and Western, mainly Hindu, provinces in 1905. The division, which prefigured the later partition of India and Pakistan, turned out to be temporary. Bengal was united again in 1911, but in 1912 the British headquarters in Delhi, along with their administrative setup, and Calcutta ceased to be a capital. As British power was on decline in India, so did Bengali enterprise. This should not be misunderstood as Bengalis being imperial. Bengal produced some of India's fiercest and most violent nationalists. The decline was because the economic fortunes of Britain and Bengal were so intertwined, and they were both essentially Victorian societies and past their peak. It is in his analysis of this history and its connection to the wider history of India that Chaudhuri is politically brave. Chaudhuri knew very few English people and had never been to England when he wrote the Autobiography of an Unknown Indian. He moved to Oxford from Delhi in 1970 at the age of 73, and there for the next 29 years cheerfully found evidence at the old empire's heart of a rich new scene of decay. Hope you enjoyed this session, the Autobiography of an Unknown Indian. Thanks for learning with us. See you in next session.